Greetings, YouTube. Take 3. A few weeks back, on one of the message boards I frequent, someone was talking about needing stats for an ape. And they wanted it as a playable race, essentially. So I threw out the idea, why don't you just use orcs? You know, file off the serial numbers, call them apes, give them a climbing speed, and if you really think that the ape needs some kind of an attack, give them a slam and call it good. It'll make them slightly better than a standard orc, but let's face it, standard orcs aren't all that powerful. And someone got upset. They said orcs aren't apes, which got me thinking. Now, in your classic D&D and Pathfinder games, you have half-orcs. An orc and a human can breed. Humans are apes. And if an orc can breed with a human, wouldn't that mean that orcs are apes? They may not look ape-like, but our ancestors did, and we don't. So who's to say that, the ancient orcs didn't look a whole lot like Gigantopithecus, or, Robustus, or something like that. Or a strain that doesn't exist anymore, or never existed, because it's for fantasy world. So I think that orcs are apes, which got me thinking, humans and orcs can interbreed, humans and elves can interbreed. What did the elven ape ancestors look like? So, which got me pondering, what about a very early campaign, prior to the Paleolithic era, really early, in the early proto era, before the Paleolithic. I don't know what that's called off the top of my head. Imagine there were fewer races. For example, the halflings and the gnomes hadn't split off yet into 2 different races, so they just had one small race. The dwarves were the best stone workers. The orcs were even more primitive than they are now, but the humans and the elves and the orcs were closer genetically than they are in the future or the present fantasy game. What would that look like? I think that's an interesting concept. I know I've seen somewhere some Arctic or Neanderthal-like stats for some of the races. I don't remember if it was in 3rd edition or might have been 2nd edition. I can't quite remember what it was. I remember that it might have been 2nd edition. I think it may have been one of those blue splat books they put out. But I think it was an interesting idea because, frankly, I think orcs are apes. And using them in a game as apes is just fine in my book. Again, just file off the serial numbers and change the fluff to describe them as being, more Planet of the Apes than, Uruk-hai, as they are often portrayed in the Pathfinder and D&D games. So I thought I'd ask my viewers, what do you think? Do you think that orcs would make a passable ape? Do you think that orcs and elves are apes, just as humans are, because they can interbreed and humans are apes? What do you think that the early ancestors of orcs and elves would look like? Would they be significantly different from our ancestors, the Homo habilis and things like that? Just an idea I thought of last night while I was at work, and I thought I'd ask the community to see what you thought.